The cognitive revolution was marked by the development of language. Although other animals have languages of their own, none can communicate complex ideas the way that human beings manage to. Because of the complexity of human language, it is what sets us apart. It is the difference between a monkey warning its mates about a predator in the sky and a human being conveying more intricate pieces of information like the exact location of a predator and what should be done about it. Language also allowed Homo sapiens to gossip. This suggests that gossip comes naturally to human beings. While it may seem negative, petty, and insignificant today, it was a major part of building trust amongst groups of Homo sapiens. It was a key to developing certain behaviors and attitudes towards one another based on who could and couldn't be trusted. Not only could Homo sapiens communicate about animals, but they could also communicate about one another, thus shaping critical social dynamics that included intimacy amongst specific groups. Even after millennia of thriving and developing, human beings had, thus far, relied solely on their brain capacity for the storage of information. It had gotten them this far, but it became increasingly evident that information was being lost through the ages. The development of complexly organized societies meant that human beings needed ways to record, store, and pass on information. This included transactions, laws, ownership, calendars, and inventories. It was a crucial part of man's need for organization. Harari explores the limitations of information storage in the past and explains the development of writing as a solution. Its origins lie with the Sumerians of southern Mesopotamia, who invented a system that allowed human beings to record, store, and share information. Not only had human beings managed to create an imagined social order, they were now able to legitimize it and carry it through the ages with a writing system. Harari goes on to describe another key distinction between human beings and animals: imagination. The ability to imagine things that do not have a tangible presence in the world, things that do not exist, is a major theme in the book. It is also described as one of the biggest building blocks of the world as we know it today. The real benefit for Homo sapiens, however, was the ability to use their advanced language to communicate these abstract ideas. Some of the most popular imaginings of the human mind are money, legends, human rights, and even corporations. These collective fictions allowed human beings to cooperate and live together under common assumptions and rules. Collective fiction was the premise of human communities, societies, and, most significantly, cultures. The ability to form this collective fiction through language is, according to the author, why sapiens rule the world, i.e. we can cooperate like no other group, species, or genus. Harari begins this book by asserting that apart from some differences in physical appearance and structure, there was no significant difference between Homo sapiens and other human species. Homo sapien is only one of 8 species of mankind. The others are Homo neanderthalensis, Homo erectus, Homo siloensis, Homo floresiensis, Homo denisova, Homo rudolfensis, and Homo ergaster. Furthermore, there was no groundbreaking distinction between these and other animals. Save for the obvious physical distinctions, there was nothing special about human beings. One would not think them to be the future rulers of the earth, as they had as little impact on the world as a jellyfish or a gorilla. It is only during the cognitive revolution that Homo sapiens began to set themselves apart. The critical distinctions that occurred during this time would ultimately shape the course of the world and its history. As human beings became more organized, shared information, and created class systems based on their imagined wealth, they naturally formed societies. Over the years, the seemingly imagined structures of societies grew clearer, and it became more natural for groups of people to behave by following certain standards. Even as different societies began to forge their unique cultures, human beings, as a collective, were shaping into a global society. Ideas around currency, politics, and religion were present in most societies. Though they differed, their basic constructs remained stable. The Mexicans had gold, while the Aztecs traded bolts and beans for goods. Similarly, human beings were shaped into a global society by common ideas of governance and politics, as well as a religious order that established similar norms and values. It is interestingly contradictory, then, that while people grew increasingly different, they were also becoming the same. Evolutionary psychology argues that the way we are, as human beings, is largely shaped by our origins as hunter-gatherers. In the scientific context, it is not uncommon to hear that human beings are vastly influenced by their past lives of hunting and gathering, from our brains to our eating habits and our sexuality. As such, we often find ourselves feeling depressed and alienated in our modern metropolitan world, despite the accessibility of resources and a longer life expectancy. One theory cited by the author suggests that the reason human beings binge on sugar-laden foods that are widely known to be unhealthy is that it was rare for Homo sapiens to stumble across sugary food all those years ago. If a gatherer did come across it, their first instinct would be to eat it all, on the spot, before a band of baboons did. As simple as this example seems, it forms part of the larger idea that our behavior today is directly influenced by Homo sapiens' origins as hunter-gatherers. The idea extends to every aspect of our lives, down to our relationships with one another. Before the cognitive revolution, human beings only occupied the landmass of Afro-Asia and small islands surrounding it. It is not clear how, but after the cognitive revolution, mankind developed ways to cross the sea barrier and migrate to other parts of the world, beginning with Australia. Up until this point, mankind's impact on the ecology of the Earth had been negligible. As hunter-gatherers who foraged fruit and hunted the occasional animal, they were able to live in a relatively harmonious balance with other species and genus. Their migration to Australia and other parts of the world, however, led to mass extinction and unprecedented destruction. Where there was once a 450-pound, 6-foot kangaroo and a marsupial lion amongst other giants, human beings caused ecological disaster within a few thousand years. At first glance, the agricultural revolution and the development of farming come across as progressive. Harari argues the contrary. While farming did give human beings access to more food and an increase in population, it also made life a lot more complicated. Nutrition was poor, there came a rise in disease, and farmers worked much too hard. Essentially, farming required human beings to do more and get less in return. Harari suggests that there is another way to look at this revolution. Instead of speaking in terms of humans domesticating plants, he shows the opposite. By creating conducive environments for the growth of these plants and nurturing them endlessly, human beings were indeed domesticated by their crops. Farmers cleared the fields of rocks and pebbles, removed weeds, built fences, and developed irrigation systems for their crops. Since their bodies were not evolved for this kind of labor, the transition to agriculture took a toll on the physical well-being of humans. In this way, farming is not as positive a development as we might think. Next to the cognitive revolution, the second significant shift in humankind's way of life was the agricultural revolution. The move from hunting and gathering to farming was a gradual accumulation of changes, as opposed to a conscious decision. People never really made decisions about where animals would graze or where they would plant specific trees and how they would tend to the land until about 10,000 years ago. It began with sapiens domesticating and tending to a select few animals and plants. By now, human beings were spread across the world, and the rise of agriculture took place independently in each region or on each continent. In Central America, maize and beans were domesticated, while in the Middle East, wheat and peas were cultivated. Still, those in China domesticated rice and pigs, West African farmers manipulated sorghum, and New Guineans took up sugarcane and bananas. With the rise of farming and agriculture, human beings began to settle and the number of nomads dwindled. More and more sapiens built structures to live in, and each established their agricultural turf. Where man and animals had all roamed around freely and in a certain harmony, farmers grew more territorial. They built houses where only they could live and where they could tend to what was theirs. It was also during this time that farmers accumulated more artifacts than the few remaining foragers. This period is distinguished by possession. In addition to a move towards distinct territories and property, farmers began to organize themselves into families and groups to share their accumulated wealth. In doing so, human beings introduced the concept of social class. Essentially, Harari suggests that it is during this time that the collective fiction shared by human beings began to justify ideas of hierarchy. Eventually, human curiosity and ambition led us to the Industrial Revolution. Up until this point, human life moved rather slowly. By finding seemingly endless ways to exploit resources both old and new, mankind has opened up possibilities that were not evident in eras gone by. The Industrial Revolution has introduced us to more raw materials and energy sources than we had before. This, in turn, has changed the narrative significantly. Human beings have gone from thoughts of finite resources, hope that the future holds more in the way of discovery, as it always has. Today, the world is incredibly different from the world our ancestors lived in. Some of the most unbelievable changes and progressions have to do with the scientific revolution. Harari cites human beings' ability to acknowledge their own ignorance as part of the reason this revolution was able to take place. That, in addition to our unyielding curiosity, our quest for knowledge, and our desire for progress, has put us at the top of the world. These qualities are characterized by human organization, economy, and ultimately, imperialism. Fueled by the knowledge that they did not know much at all, human beings began to explore. One of the first explorations that created a foundation for the scientific revolution was the discovery of America. It ignited an era of searching for knowledge and pursuing the unknown. At the same time, the quest for scientific knowledge worked hand in hand with the desire to conquer new parts of the world. People were not just setting sail to find lands they had never been to, they were also going out to conquer them. Our evolution has exceeded that of other species, and we have achieved that which our ancestors could only have imagined. But has all of our progress made us happier? And if not, can we truly deem our evolution a success? Historians rarely ask whether we would have been better off, in terms of happiness, as hunter-gatherers. We also tend to assume that happiness is a result of material things like health and wealth. Harari argues that progress doesn't necessarily result in happiness. Even though human beings have made leaps and bounds in the economy, religion, science, philosophy, and everything in between, we have ultimately created a complicated and often unrewarding life. We work harder and have much less time for leisure than our foraging ancestors did. We have developed countless illnesses as a result of our lifestyles. We have forged systems of capitalism and class that cause suffering to many. We've even driven ourselves to alienation and meaningless existence in modern affluent societies. Using these and many other valid examples, Harari shows that happiness isn't necessarily a result of progress, and that progress doesn't necessarily lead to happiness.